Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping away from the usual geopolitical knots for a very different kind of analysis. We're getting into let's call it the architecture of deception.
We're headed to the seaside town of St. Louis, the so-called queen of watering places. And the source material puts us right in the middle of a summer heat wave, but the real heat is coming from the cold, calculated planning of a killer.
Right. It's August 1925, and we're following the documented investigation files of Hercule Poirot.
Who is, it's important to note, trying to enjoy a retirement.
A self-declared one, yeah. At the Majestic Hotel, this grand place overlooking the sea. But of course, a series of very strange incidents just pulls him right back in.
It always does.
The whole premise is just brilliant. It's so simple, but the execution is terrifying. You have this young woman, Maggie Buckley, who seems to be the target of just almost comically bad luck.
I mean, falling paintings, boulders rolling off cliffs, car brakes that suddenly fail.
And then the one that nobody can ignore,
Yeah.
the final straw. A witness assassination attempt, a bullet that goes straight through her hat.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to take these events, which, most people at the time just dismissed as coincidence, maybe bad luck.
Or we're being dramatic.
Exactly. And we're going to use Poirot's methodical analysis to find the hidden structure underneath it all, because he saw it right away. When a killer takes risks this big, this daring, the motive can't be simple. It has to be profound, and it has to be hidden.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We have this sequence of bizarre events. The normal human reaction is to explain them away, right? Until you can't. So what's the first challenge for an investigator here, trying to separate a calculated plan from just genuine chance?
I think what's so fascinating is how the sheer audacity of it all forces you to look beyond the obvious. The biggest challenge is realizing the accidents are the crime's foundation.
They're not just failed attempts.
Not at all. I mean, if someone survives 4 near-death experiences, the police, they tend to file it under unlucky or maybe imaginative victim. But Poirot understood that the killer wasn't just trying to kill Nick. They were actively trying to establish her as a victim.
In the eyes of the world.
Yes. Legitimizing the final successful murder that they knew was coming.
So the incidents aren't just attempts. They're psychological groundwork. They're designed to make sure that when the bullet finally hits its target, everyone just nods and says, oh, of course, the anonymous killer finally succeeded.
Precisely. It's a masterclass in preemptive witness tampering. And the tool they're using is public perception itself, the narrative of misfortune.
All right, let's get into the setting and the supposed victim, Maggie Buckley. St. Louis is painted as this glamorous Riviera-like resort at the height of the summer season. But her home, End House, it's the complete opposite.
End House is so important to this whole story. It's this huge, dreary, collapsing estate. It's mortgaged to the hilt, but it's the last tie to her family, the Buckleys, who've been on that land for, 200 or 300 years.
She's the last of the line.
She is. And this house, even though it's technically worthless, it becomes the emotional anchor for the entire narrative. Everything revolves around it.
And Nick herself, she's a study in contrast. Peril watches her and sees this small, vivid, pansy-shaped face, these huge, dark blue eyes. He calls it an elfin look.
With a hint of recklessness. She's modern, she's social, she's always late. She takes shortcuts, both on the footpaths and, in life.
And she describes herself as leading a charmed life.
That phrase, a charmed life, that's just pure gold for an investigator. It's a classic defense mechanism, isn't it? She's being flippant to brush off things that should objectively be terrifying her. But Poirot sees through that. He sees that recklessness suggests someone who is willing to take massive risks. And this profile, the cheerful, a little bit disorganized, risk-taking young woman, that's exactly the kind of person whose death could easily be chalked up to a tragic accident.
Or even suicide.
Or later, even suicide, exactly.
Okay, let's break down the 4 accidents that she told Poirot about. Because the logistics of each one, they really prove the killer knew her routine and her house inside and out.
So start with the picture. A heavy oil painting in a really heavy frame falls right onto her bed.
And she's only saved because she got up for a second to shut a banging door. Just pure luck.
Or so it seems. When Poirot looks at it, he sees the cord holding it up wasn't a strong wire cable, which you'd expect for something that heavy. It was just a regular rope cord.
Which means it's easy to tamper with.
So easy. The killer, who clearly had access to the house, just had to fray it a little bit, weaken it so it would snap with just a small vibration or, just over time. It's low effort, but incredibly high lethality. And Nick even says anyone could have gotten into the house. No security.
Okay, next up is the rolling boulder. She's going down this scrambly cliff path to the sea for a dive.
And a huge boulder gets dislodged from above her and just narrowly misses her.
And she shows Poirot the exact spot.
Yes, and that location is key. It's a spot that's totally unobserved from the house, and it's not a public path. This proves the attacker was someone who knew the land really well, someone who could move around unseen. This wasn't a random rock fall. It had to be manipulated by someone positioned right above her.
It's effective, but you need precise timing.
Very precise.
And the third one, the brakes on her car. The source material confirms it. A mechanic from a place called Mock's Garage. He verified the brakes were sabotaged. She almost had a major crash going down a steep hill.
This one feels different. It's maybe the most calculated of the first three. Well, Nick herself, she admits she knows nothing about cars. She's completely dependent on the mechanic's word for what happened. All she remembers is him saying it would have been a major smash.
And the garage was unlocked, easy to get to.
Right. Tampering with brakes takes a certain amount of nerve and maybe some technical skill. It narrows the pool of suspects to people who might have that kind of confidence. Like, say, Jim Lazarus, who later boasts that he knows something about cars.
And then the fourth incident. The one Poirot and Hastings see with their own eyes. The bullet through the hat, fired in the hotel garden when it was deserted.
And the bullet they recover is from a Mauser pistol. This is the moment it shifts from a string of bad luck to undeniable attempted murder.
Instantly.
The Mauser is the crucial piece. It's a distinctive, high-caliber weapon. And what does Nick immediately say?
That she owns one. It was a souvenir her father brought home from the war.
An antique. A sentimental object just knocking around, as she puts it, in a bureau drawer back at End House.
And when they check the drawer,
it's gone. Of course it's gone. And this is where Poirot forms his initial theory. It's brilliant, but as we find out, it's completely wrong.
his little idea.
Yes. He tells Hastings his little idea.
Huh.
The killer wasn't just trying to shoot her. They were engineering the perfect suicide.
The plan is chilling.
It's so simple. Kill Nick, leave her own Mauser pistol right there by her hand, and make her death look self-inflicted.
And all that groundwork, the accidents, her supposed nervy state, which the maid Ellen is happy to confirm, it would make the suicide story completely believable to the local police.
Absolutely. The whole plan hinged on Nick's psychological profile. She was worried, she was reckless, she'd already survived 4 near-death events. That could easily be spun as mounting stress leading to a breakdown. And the Mauser, this unique traceable gun, would tie the death directly and neatly back to her. The killer needed the gun, they needed Nick to be seen as a victim, and they needed an expert witness. Poirot to confirm the threat was real before the planned suicide could happen.
So we've got undeniable attempts on her life. We have the missing Mauser, the bullet hole, the whole thing. And Poirot's logic is, because the attacks were so daring, the motive can't be obvious.
Exactly. And Nick herself says, you know, my house is mortgaged up to the hilt. I don't have any enemies. There's no reason.
So we start with what's on the surface, the will. End house goes to her cousin, Charles Weiss. Everything else goes to her friend, Frederica Rice.
But these are liabilities, not assets. The place is a money pit. So Poirot is searching for that factor lacking, the hidden motive that makes all these crazy risks make sense.
Let's run through the initial suspect list then. Starting with the heir to the property, Charles Weiss, the lawyer.
He's Nick's cousin, handles her messy finances, and gets the house and the will. Nick just calls him very dull.
Repressed. Not exactly a killer profile.
No, a dull lawyer is the last person you suspect. But here's the thing. Later, when Poirot goes to him, pretending he might want to buy End House, Weiss pushes back hard. He insists Nick has a fanatical devotion to the place and would never, ever sell it. Now, why would he so fiercely protect a dilapidated, worthless property unless he knew something about its secret value? Or something about Nick's future value?
And he was also away from his office during the shooting in the hotel garden.
A suspicious absence, yes.
Okay, next up, Frederica Rice, the friend, the legatee for the leftover assets.
She's described as fair, languorous, and she's in a terrible marriage to a man who drinks and uses drugs.
A beast, I think is the word used.
Right. Now, Frederica's immediate importance to the investigation is what she says about Nick. She tells Hastings, out of nowhere, that Nick is a heaven-sent little liar.
That's such a strange thing to say about your friend who's just been shot at.
It's incredibly curious. Why would you volunteer that? Unless you're actively trying to discredit Nick's stories about the accidents. It puts her under suspicion immediately for trying to manipulate the narrative. And of course, she's connected to this drug world through her husband, which becomes a whole other thread later on.
And her boyfriend, or at least the man she's with, is Jim Lazarus, the financier.
The dealer, yeah. Handsome, confident, drives a big red car. He's the one who jumps in to talk about the car box, saying he knows something about cars.
So he has the means, or at least the knowledge, to have tampered with them.
Or to lie about how bad the damage was. And he and Frederica are a unit. They provide alibis for each other, which, in any investigation, is always a red flag.
And the last of this inner circle, Commander Challenger, the suitor.
Ah, the good scout. The
What?
sailor with the booming laugh. He's known Nick for years, mentions marriage, but she finds him boring.
And neither of them have any money.
Right. He seems like a classic red herring. But his job means he travels a lot, gives him opportunities, and being a military man, he'd know about weapons. His real role, though, as we find out, has nothing to do with the murder, but everything to do with the other crimes happening around Nick.
And Poirot,
Yeah.
he traps Frederica almost immediately with that casual comment about the Buchanan family in Tavistock.
It's such a simple, brilliant move.
It's a fake name, right?
Completely fake. It's just a low-stakes honesty test. He drops a fake name, watches her react, and forces her to admit they weren't where they said they were. They were actually in Shellicombe, only 7 miles away. It establishes a pattern of deception. They're hiding something.
And the break situation just becomes a total mess of lies. Nick says tampered. Freddie claims Jim said it was nothing at all.
But Poirot checked with the garage. The brakes were faulty, so someone is actively trying to downplay the threat. Is it Jim covering his tracks, or is it Frederica lying about what Jim said to protect him? Or to just keep chipping away at Nick's credibility?
It's a knot.
A beautiful, tangled knot for an investigator.
We also have to talk about the tenants in the lodge. The Crofts. Mr. and Mrs. Croft.
Yes. The Australians. They're described as hearty and oppressively kind. Mrs. Croft is in a wheelchair from a train accident years ago.
And they seem very interested in Nick's haunted look.
Yes, and her family history. Her grandfather, old Nick. They insert themselves into her life with this unnerving familiarity. And their big suspicious moment is when Mr. Croft is found inside End House, just on the stairs, near her bedroom, on a Sunday morning.
His excuse was plausible, though. He thought Poirot was bringing a chain for the picture.
Plausible, yes. But it puts him right where the first accident happened, and right where the missing Mauser pistol might have been stored. It shows they had access, they had opportunity, and their interest in the family's past. Well, that positions them perfectly for their own little scheme involving Nick's will.
A scheme that becomes a massive diversion later.
A crucial one. So at this point, Poirot has a list of suspects. They're all telling small lies, they all have secrets, but none of them seem to have a motive big enough for these kinds of theatrical, high-risk murder attempts. He knows the real prize, the real stakes, are still completely hidden.
The story really pivots during Regatta Week. Nick throws a party, there are fireworks.
Which provide the perfect cover for the sound of a gunshot. This is the night where all the careful planning collides with a single, tragic, fatal mistake.
And Nick's cousin, Maggie Buckley, has arrived. We're told Nick called for her urgently on Poirot's advice to have an impartial witness there for protection.
The key events happen so fast. Nick goes inside to get a coat, and she throws her very distinctive, bright scarlet Chinese shawl on a sofa.
An identifier.
The perfect identifier. Maggie, who's still downstairs, feels a chill, can't find her own coat, so she borrows the scarlet shawl.
And that flash of red is what the killer was targeting.
During the noise of the fireworks, Maggie is shot 3 times. With the Mauser, she's standing near the French window, and the killer, seeing that shawl, mistakes her for Nick. The 3 shots. That's not an accident. That's desperation to make sure the job is done this time.
And when Poirot and Hastings find the body, Nick's reaction is strange.
It's profound, and it's not what you'd expect. She comes in, sees the body, and she cries out, "Why couldn't it have been me? I don't want to live now." It's such an extreme reaction. It goes beyond shock. It feels like a hidden guilt or a sorrow that doesn't quite fit the situation.
And there's another small clue right after. The maid, Ellen. She's so eager, asking if it was Mrs. Rice Frederica who was shot.
Before anyone could have known, it suggests she had her own ideas about who the target should be, or maybe who the killer was.
And this is the moment. The real aha moment that just flips the entire case upside down. Poirot starts re-examining Nick's recent behavior.
Her deep distress, her nerves, and a very strange detail. She recently bought a black dress, a color she usually hated. He connects all this back to the one question he couldn't answer. If End House is worthless, what is the real prize?
He confronts Nick, and she finally reveals her big secret. She was engaged to Captain Michael Seton, the famous airman who just went missing.
And the engagement was a secret because Seton's uncle, Sir Matthew, was bankrolling his flight. And Sir Matthew hated women and forbade Michael from marrying.
And Sir Matthew, the second richest man in England, had died just a week before the murder,
leaving his entire massive fortune, we're talking millions, to Michael Seton, who was then himself declared lost at sea.
So the money trail is there. Seton made a will before his flight, leaving everything to his fiancée. Nick claims that's her.
But this is where Poirot makes the devastating leap, the brilliant deduction. He realizes that Michael Seton's fiancée was not Nick Buckley.
Oh.
The real beneficiary, the person named in that informal but legally binding will, the person who was set to inherit all those millions, was the dead girl, Magdala Buckley.
They have the same name, Magdala.
They have the same name, and Nick, whose first name is also Magdala, just assumed the will referred to her. But Seton had been secretly engaged to her cousin, Maggie, so the entire investigation was built on a case of mistaken identity, a shared name, and a hidden engagement.
So the motive,
yeah,
it's completely inverted.
Completely. Nick wasn't the target of someone who wanted Endhouse, and she wasn't the target of someone who wanted the Seton fortune because she wasn't the heiress. Maggie was. The killer had already succeeded. They killed the true heiress. And suddenly, Nick's survival is the biggest threat to them. This forces Poirot to question absolutely everything Nick has told him. If she was wrong about this, what else was she lying about?
And this huge financial stake is what retroactively explains the sheer audacity of it all. The need to stage those accidents.
It was all to build her case as the tragic hunted victim.
Okay, so after the murder, Poirot's priority is Nick. He moves her to a nursing home immediately.
And it's not just for shock, it's for security. He turns the medical staff into guards. His one rule is absolute: do not touch anything that comes in from outside. He knows the killer has realized their mistake and they will try again.
At the same time, he's digging into the legal side of the Seton estate.
Right. He's talking to the solicitors. They confirm the fortune is colossal. And they confirm the legal mess of 3 rapid deaths. Sir Matthew, then Michael Seton, and now potentially Nick. They're drowning in paperwork about death duties. The money is very, very real.
And despite the security, the killer makes a 5th attempt. Nick is poisoned at the nursing home.
She survives, just barely. The poison is cocaine, and it was delivered in a box of Fuller's chocolates.
And this is the move that Poirot calls genius.
It is, because the poisoned chocolates arrived with a card that read, "With the compliments of Hercule Poirot."
The killer used his own name.
They used his reputation to get past the guards. The nurses, they know Nick is under the protection of this famous detective, a gift from him. They wouldn't question it for a second.
But then it gets more complicated. They find out there were 2 boxes of chocolates.
Yes. One came in the mail, sender unknown. And the poisoned box was hand-delivered by a gentleman.
Jim Lazarus.
Jim Lazarus, who, when they confront him, says Frederica Rice asked him to buy them.
And Frederica's story?
Frederica claims Nick herself called her from the nursing home and asked for the chocolates. But she adds a strange detail. She says Nick's voice on the phone sounded different somehow.
So it's just a circular train of lies. No one is taking responsibility.
Exactly. It's designed to completely muddy the waters, to make it impossible to trace who actually sent the poison.
And while this is going on, Commander Challenger shows up again, completely distraught about Nick. And this is what opens up the whole drug connection, right?
It does. Poirot was already suspicious of Challenger's movements. He took an hour and a half to make a 30-mile drive. He had to have made a stop somewhere.
And then Challenger reveals his uncle is a nerve specialist on Harley Street.
Dr. McAllister. And that clicks with Frederica Rice, who we know was recovering from a drug problem. The pieces of the supply chain fall into place. That distinctive wristwatch that Frederica wore.
Nick had one just like it.
They weren't just jewelry. They were containers. Little globe-shaped vessels for carrying cocaine.
So Challenger and his uncle, the nerve specialist, were running a discreet drug ring.
Precisely. And we find out later Nick used the drug sometimes for fun, which means her poisoning was staged. She knew what she was taking. The goal was to frame Frederica, who was clearly connected to the drug supply through Challenger. It was meant to look like an overdose or a drug-related suicide attempt. It reinforces the whole suicide narrative from the Mauser plan.
And at the same time, the will investigation is happening. Nick remembers sending her original will.
The one leaving the worthless house to Charles and the rest to Freddie.
Right. She sent it to Charles Weiss. And she says Mr. Croft advised her on it.
But Vice says he never got it, and Mr. Croft swears he personally mailed it in the postbox by the gate. A direct contradiction.
Which puts the spotlight right on the Crofts.
And Poirot eventually uncovers their long con. They knew Nick's father back in Australia. They were opportunists.
So what was their plan?
It's quite clever in its own way. Poirot figures out they must have intercepted and held on to the real worthless will. Then, when they hear that Nick is dead, from a fake death announcement Poirot puts out later, they immediately mail a forged will to Vice.
A forgery that benefits them.
Of course. It names Mrs. Croft as the sole beneficiary in grateful recognition of her supposed help to Nick's father. They were only after the house. They had no idea about the Seton millions. But their little scheme, the will forgery, it created this massive, confusing red herring that perfectly concealed the real killer's much bigger prize.
So after this fifth attempt, the poisoning, Poirot he hits a wall. He feels like a failure.
A crisis of confidence. He actually says he feels immense self-reproach, that he's been played by a brilliant actress. He literally crumples up his list of suspects A through J because his entire foundation, the idea that Nick was the victim, was wrong.
And it's in that moment of, intellectual humility that he finds the one clue he missed.
The one fact he rationalized away, it's the keystone that cracks the entire case. Maggie Buckley's letter home.
The letter, what did it say?
It said, "I don't see why Nick should have telegraphed for me the way she did. Tuesday would have done just as well."
She was already coming.
She was already scheduled to arrive on Tuesday. Nick lied. She never sent an urgent wire for an impartial witness after the attack started. She deliberately sped up Maggie's arrival.
So she wasn't looking for protection.
She was setting a trap. She was the perpetrator. And Maggie was the real intended victim, lured to her death a day early to fit Nick's horrifying schedule.
The fireworks party.
The fireworks party. And Poirot realizes K stood for the one person who was never on his list because she was the one he was trying to protect.
Nick Buckley herself. Magdala Buckley.
She was ruthless, she was calculating, and she was utterly desperate to get her hands on the Seton fortune, which she wrongly believed was meant for her because they shared the name Magdala.
The accidents. The picture cord, the brakes, the Mauser bullet that just grazed her hat, all of it was staged.
All self-inflicted. All staged to create this incredibly believable threat, which was then validated by the great Hercule Poirot himself. She manufactured her own victimhood to give herself the perfect alibi for murder.
And the final act. It was so precise. She shoots Maggie, knowing the will name's Magdala Buckley. She bought a black dress to blend in, then used her own scarlet shawl as the fatal identifier, only to conveniently leave it behind for Maggie to pick up.
It's chilling.
So to force the endgame, Poirot stages this incredibly theatrical climax. He fakes Nick's death.
He puts an announcement in the paper and gathers all the suspects, A through I, back at End House for a dramatic reading of the will.
And this is what forces the Crofts to make their move.
Right. Vice reads their forged will, the one leaving everything to Mrs. Croft. And she, terrified her original crime of suppressing the real will is about to be exposed, partly confesses. She admits the connection to Nick's father, but swears she knew nothing about any millions, which confirms they're just small-time crooks, only after the house.
And then the tension just skyrockets. Nick appears.
Alive.
Yeah.
Dressed all in white, playing a ghost. And this is aimed squarely at the maid, Ellen, who screams that murderers always walk, basically revealing she'd suspected Nick all along.
In all that chaos, a shot is fired from the window, and Frederica gets grazed.
That's J. Frederica's drug addict husband, the blackmailer. He'd been hiding outside the face at the window Hastings saw earlier. He was trying to kill his wife, probably thinking she was Nick in the dark. He's caught, but dies almost immediately. A secondary threat. Neutralized.
But the real evidence against Nick, the final nail, comes right after.
Yes. The frenzy dies down, and Nick calmly asks Frederica for her wristwatch.
The cocaine container.
The cocaine container. It proves she's a user, and that the poisoning was a calculated plot to frame Freddie.
But her biggest mistake is still to come.
Her final, fatal error. She tries to plant the Mauser pistol, which she'd just retrieved from a secret panel that she had sworn didn't exist. She tries to plant it in Frederica's coat.
She thought the fake will reading made Freddie the new prime suspect.
Exactly. She thought if Freddie now stood to inherit, she'd have the motive. It was her last chance to frame her friend.
But Jap, Poirot's police contact, was watching.
He was. He saw her get the pistol from the secret hiding place. And that's it. Nick is arrested for the murder of Maggie Buckley. All the lies, the staging, the murder weapon, it all comes together in that one desperate final attempt to frame someone
And
else.
Poirot just,
Yeah.
he cleans it all up so quickly after that.
Ties up all the loose ends. He confronts Challenger about the cocaine trafficking. Challenger flees. Then Lazarus, the art dealer, explains his strange lowball offer for the painting.
That was just a psychological trick, right?
A classic dealer's gambit. He offered a low price for a worthless painting, hoping Nick would think it was secretly valuable. That would build her trust in him, so she'd then let him buy a different painting, one on another wall that was actually worth £5,000 for a fraction of its price. His motive was profit, but not murder.
Wow. So the sheer amount of crime surrounding her, the drug running, the blackmail, the forgery, the art scam, it was all just smoke. A smokescreen to hide Nick's one central monstrous crime. So at the end of the day, this investigation really shows how important it is to see past the performance of victimhood. Nick Buckley, this small, vivid woman with the elfin look, she was the puppet master.
She manipulated Poirot's own process. She staged these incidents specifically so he would confirm her life was in danger. The murder of Maggie was just collateral damage, all for greed and a simple confusion over a name.
She used the world's greatest detective as her expert witness. So when the real murder finally happened, it was automatically seen as just the last act in a play he was already watching.
It really does raise a question, doesn't it? When this fanatical devotion to a place, to end house, and the ambition for millions, when that completely outweighs a human life, how far away is the criminal from the madman? Nick's crime, it wasn't just calculated, it required a total severing of human connection, which makes her performance of grief for Maggie all the more chilling.
The source material really emphasizes her fanatical devotion to end house. So here's something to think about. What would Nick, a woman capable of this incredibly elaborate and deadly deception, have actually done if she'd gotten away with it? When she had the millions, would she have just restored End House to its former glory and lived out her days as a wealthy lady of the manor? Or would the house itself have become something else, a permanent monument to her perfect, deadly crime?